Hello, my name is Raymond Karczewski. I am a living Christ. I share with you today the story of you, the living man, living in a fictional society based on words, ideas, rules, regulations. This is the story of my personal experiences on a traffic stop made by Oregon State Trooper Jessica Rice on the 10th day of November 2019 at 9:30 p.m. in Cave Junction, Grants Pass, I should say. And it is the story of a legal response that I sent to the traffic court judges before the court date so that there can be a clear understanding that is not allowed for in court appearances. The fact is that all of you are captive. You're persons. You're no longer living men and women. You've given that up when you have consented to becoming a person, one who belongs to a system of thought called government or religion. You sell your souls. You sell your sovereignty. You sell your freedom. Well, you are allowed liberty. That's permission. But you see, it's not the same thing as freedom. So let me get on with this video. I have revised it and I have deleted all of the legalese required in my response to the traffic court judges, or the legal profession for that matter, for it's all satanic. And I want you to understand that. You believe it's civilized, it's righteous. You, after reading this or watching this video, you will see that you have been indoctrinated. First of all, let me begin by saying that attention all living Americans. Isn't it time that we hold fictional county, state, and federal governments responsible for their criminal actions? Attention! President Donald J. Trump. Now let me get on with the narrative. Jessica Rice, an Oregon state trooper, effected a bogus traffic stop on this living man who was traveling home to Cave Junction on Highway 99, 199, in his private automobile. Keep in mind, I said I was traveling, not driving, for there is a difference. Driving is applied, restricted only to commercial activity while using your automobile and must be licensed by the state. But the state has fraudulently convinced you that you need a license to travel in your private automobile. Not so. The Supreme Court has already decided that factor, and yet the police departments, the law enforcement agencies, still conduct their enforcement of that in making unlawful, bogus traffic stops. That's the case with this living man. But this living man doesn't give in. to such intimidation. Let me get on with this. The state of Oregon has no financial interest, ties, or contracts with this living man or automobile. Rice had admitted that no traffic violation was noted, but for the private license plate that I displayed on the automobile. That was the reason for the stop. This living man's status is that of a sovereign man, not an indentured, fictional person in servitude to the satanic government of the state of Oregon. This was all proven in court when this living man's birth certificated person bogusly stood convicted in 2 trials by the fraudulent actions of the Josephine County Courts, but was released by the same Josephine County Courts and set free with no charges. When I, this living man, refused to accept the sentence and challenged the court to prove jurisdiction over this living man. He did not. They could not. Yet they continue to defraud their creator. Who is their creator? Living men and women. You see, government is a fiction. It is merely a thought in the minds, the intellectual, trained minds of living men and women, that becomes the fiction that rules over other fictional persons converted by the magic of satanic legalese. You see, a person is a non-entity, but is under the jurisdiction of the courts, who are under the jurisdiction of the living man who created them. But they have taken power, satanic power, by creating persons. And without your knowledge or awareness, you consented to being a person. You did that when you did not contest your birth certification, which creates living men, living entities, into non-living persons. That is the start of slavery in a world, and that is what you are here to learn about. I'm here to assist you, to bring that fantasy to light, to truth. You see, that was all proven in court when this living man's birth certificated person bogusly stood convicted in 2 trials. 2 trials. Where I stood, sui juris, spoke for myself, and did not accept legal advice by fictitious attorneys who are part of the system which defrauds living men. You see, after these 2 trials where the defendant, the person, bearing my name in capital letters from my birth certification, was convicted. At the time of sentencing, I refused to accept their sentence. How brazen of me. However, brazen only for those who are unaware of who they truly are. For I challenged them to prove jurisdiction over this living man, and they could not. And they have tried for 17 years and have failed. I must reiterate that I, Raymond Ronald Karczewski, the living man, the creditor, the secured party, demand that this issue be dismissed unless jurisdiction can be proven. Failure to do so will result in the additional claims over and above the existing legal claim made against the state of Oregon by this living sovereign man. Judges, the former Secretary of State, now Governor Kate Brown, prior Oregon State's Attorney, prior sheriff's administrations, and district attorneys, the district director of DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, were all criminal in supporting the racketeering of the traveling public who travels the highway and are not engaged in commerce, thereby negating the need for a license, for permission to travel. That is their infringement upon their right to travel, their God-given right. All this was established on court records that the state of Oregon, via its agents, were given written notice of the false suspension of driving privileges. Do you understand? That presently exist, even though there's no license to suspend since 1999 when I rescinded my license. Apparently, the state of Oregon will not recognize such rescindment and have formulated the lie that such license was indeed suspended after 1999 when no license actually existed. That's the first crime committed by the government. Full records of the crime spree, the cover-ups, the continued harassment of this officer, impounding cars, costing him, robbing him of monies in order to get his car back when they had no jurisdiction over him to begin with. A record of all these crimes can be found on my website, sarkenterprises.com, and lisarayenterprises.com, along with the search engines of the internet under my name. Now, President Donald J. Trump was given a prosecution package by this living man with ample evidence on his inauguration day. I must say that I was a former police sergeant. I'm honorably retired and have been retired for some time now. I was the court officer, so I am aware of the enforcement aspects of law enforcement. And I also understand the lack of training existing now in law enforcement agencies which focus upon the enforcement aspect of law, but they don't understand what law is. And that is what the issue of this video and my writings on the internet are all about. Now, Trooper Rice and her partner, Rupert Doran, handcuffed me and were going to arrest me, as I would not apply to their demands that I identify myself. Since no crime had been committed, I stood silent. Eventually, I recanted and ID'd myself. They towed the automobile and intended to leave me stranded. They could not drive me home, or they would not drive me home, but they offered to call a cab for me at my expense, which they ultimately did. Rice gave me a copy of the tow report and advised that I could bail it out of impound on November the 11th, 2019. It appeared that their motive was their training of revenue gathering, as they seemed only to want to tow the auto. With respects to this living man who stood alone, sui juris, in 2 trials, resulting from this 17-year campaign to harass this living man, he was set free by the courts with no charges when this living man, and not the person created by government, the citizen, refused to accept the trial sentence, and I demanded that the court prove jurisdiction over this living man, that alone. Aside from the decades of harassment, arrests, holding me hostage, and covering it up, is proof of the fraudulent intent of the county of Josephine, the state of Oregon government, to not follow their own law, and to commit crimes against the people that they claim to serve. However, the records continue to this very day to show the bogus convictions, along with the NCIC police computer, which bogusly shows this living man, to this day, to be suspended from driving privileges. This living man asks for no privileges. He is the creator of government. He is the sovereign. He needn't ask permission of any fictional government. And neither should you. Look at it. Are you free to do, to live, to abide with truth? Or are you restricted by words, ideas of a fictional agency? That's what life is for most of you. Now, all communications that I have sent to state and county judges, sheriffs, and administrators to change the bogus information of suspension of license have been sent in vain. They have ignored it. They have refused to do their duty to set the truth to a matter of deceit. My Oregon license was rescinded by me, which could not have been a license to suspend, since my retirement of it took place in 1997, and all such traffic stops since that time are crimes committed by government because there was no license, there was no jurisdiction. And the courts of Josephine County, when they released me, when I refused to accept their sentence, admitted that. Of the state of Oregon and the county of Josephine have committed crimes against this living man. And no amount of effort on my part to change the bogus information on the police and CIC computer by judges, sheriffs, and administrators contacted worked, as I say. This criminal operation, seemingly well planned and executed in arresting, impounding, and towing vehicles as a part of revenue gathering, approaches racketeering in these United States of America, a fictitious government, which now wears the mask of a fictitious corporation. Somehow or another, they have changed a government of the people, by the people, and for the people into a private corporation. That's another fraud perpetrated upon the people of America. As a result of the state criminal justice system covering up the crimes of false arrest, jail awaiting time, 128 days, 121 days in solitary confinement, and a combined 55-day hunger, protest, strike, leaving me, this living man, near death, according to the Josephine County jail nurse. This living man presently holds $80 million in perfected UCC liens. Uniform Commercial Code liens on judges. Keep in mind, this is their law, not the law of God, which I follow, which is do no harm and tell no lies. Therefore, I have no need for the fictional government and its laws. However, you do. This living man presently holds $80 million, as I say, on judges, district attorneys, sheriffs, and deputies, along with another $80 million for damages on these corporations and their employees as a result of the principal agent, principle of law, again, their law. All this for a total of $160 million. But the government, hardball it, because they can. Because most of you doubt yourselves. You understand what I'm saying here? Trooper Rice of the Oregon State Police was given a copyright notice, and she refused to read it, but was allowed to take a photo of the copyright notice. That is presently filed with the Josephine County Court Office, the court recorder, that an unlawful mining of this living Christ's name through copyright, common law copyright, lawfully carries with it a $500,000 fee each and every time it is used without authorization. And she used it twice in formulating the citation, accruing the amount of million. She struck a contract. She accepted the terms of the contract and proceeded further to rob this living man through bogus fines, the violations that do not apply to this living man, but to persons who contract their rights away. This applies also to the traffic court judges, in that they may not use my name because it is copyright, and each time they do, they accrue a fee of $500,000 each and every time. That is the law. That is the law that's being broken by fictitious law enforcement agencies and courts. This applies to all judges, district attorneys, state troopers, and government bureaucrats who use that name in order to defraud this traveler with its criminal schemes upon living man and women, over which they have no jurisdiction unless it is consented to. You agree to be a person. You agree to be a citizen. The following information requires action by the sitting court judge when he finally identifies himself, and with all other fictional persons who are involved in this criminal assault upon all travelers who use the right to travel non-commercially on the highways of our nation. I, Raymond Ronald Karczewski, a natural-born American, am a common man of the sovereign people, arising under the original jurisdiction of the de jure Constitution of the United States of 1789, as amended by the qualified electors of the several states of the American Union, and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 for the territories of the de jure, not the de facto, but the de jure United States. This living man, am tired of fictional governments and its fictional employees carrying on this 2-decade-long campaign to defraud me, to arrest me, which is really kidnapping, and to incarcerate me, which is to hold me for hostage, because that's the motive behind it all. Money, power. They do this to me and all other lawful travelers on the highway who have not engaged in commerce and therefore have no need to be licensed. Statutes and codes are not law. They are merely corporate policies which apply to all who have contracted their freedoms away by becoming consensual citizens. They do not apply to non-consensual living men and women. By law, this living man was robbed of $340, as no fictional law enforcement officer has any jurisdiction over this or any other living man and I wish to file criminal charges upon State Trooper Rice, and that she and all other bogus persons masquerading as law officers in the country be prosecuted under the law. This highway piracy must come to an end. It must stop. I, this living man, am prepared to negotiate the $160 million that is defaulted through perfected UCC liens and another $80 million, equaling the $160 cost for damages based on the principal agent violation that is presently owed to this living man. I hereby make such claim and announce it to the world against the county of Josephine and the state of Oregon for all such crimes that have been committed against this living man since September the 5th, 2002. I shall not appear in court, as I will not give consent to threats of jail or prison by criminal, fictional employees of the state and county of Oregon. My appearing in court on specified contract of citation would well be construed as consent, agreement, and thereby a contract between the state of Oregon and myself, thereby granting jurisdiction to the state and their criminal operation. That's not going to happen, you see. That's how you are controlled, by contract, by your own consent, by your own agreement. And when you understand that, government loses its power over you, because you have created government, and government is merely a fiction. As such, I, this living man, give all such satanic fictional persons the opportunity to grow in understanding and wisdom and free your souls from this satanic bondage that you call civilized life. You understand that everything I'm saying to you is a matter of indoctrination. I, this living, breathing, flesh and blood, sentient, natural man, is looked upon as by the satanic courts as a secured party, creditor, and holder in due course, and an authorized representative for the juristic person of Raymond Ronald Karchevsky, whose name is spelled in all capital letters, therefore is created into a juristic person. I am not an accommodation party. I am a living man, nor am I a surety for the debts of such fictitious personage created by government. I am also held harmless by the fictional person Raymond Ronald Karchevsky in the hold harmless indemnity agreement that is filed with the Josephine County Court's Office. This living, breathing, flesh and blood, sentient, natural man, man of truth, which is what a Christ is fed up with the unlawful, unconstitutional rights infringement tactics of the corporate security force, the sheriff's office, the police departments, the state police agency, backed up by unconstitutional administrative courts, not constitutional courts, but merely bogus representations of a corporate agency and their prosecutors. All of these fictional employees who swear an oath to protect and serve are quick to arrest, to cite, to steal, to rob, and incarcerate, yet have not, will not, and avoid like hell answering the simple fundamental questions of their asserted but not yet proved jurisdiction over this or any other living man who is not surety for the debts of the living dead juristic person under the jurisdiction of legal fiction, satanic legal fiction. For they only have jurisdiction over the person which they have created through birth certification. The question arises, I'm sure, in your minds. Why do I not foreclose upon the many and varied, outstanding commercial default judgments by man's law? Not God's law, but by man's law. And I follow God's law. Therefore, I am exempt from man's law. I am immune to man's law. And the court's release of me prove that. But for you, who are still held in bondage, the answer is quite simple. Why I do not foreclose. I cannot do it alone. Because you, as indoctrinated, believing persons, cannot understand that. It requires the attention of thousands of Oregonians and perhaps millions of Americans, sufficiently outraged at a corrupt government which snubs their noses at their own U.S. Constitution and common law. That is why I have, for years now, called for a nationwide boycott of government and its satanic courts. If the sovereign people of Oregon and of these United States of America understood the importance of this question of government having jurisdiction only over other fictional juristic persons or over those who have willingly waived their rights and consented to granting the court's jurisdiction over them as citizens, and not over living men and women. Thousands of innocent people who now languish in prisons all over America as a result of this fraud can be restored to wholeness from the acts of this satanic government. We must set free all innocent prisoners who are incarcerated as a result of these non-law revenue gathering policies and statutes which do not amount to law but apply only to consensual citizens and non-living corporate persons. It is time that living men who have been fraudulently arrested through these revenue-gathering schemes be set free, because the criminal fraudulent action committed by law enforcers, judges, and prosecutors, not only here in Oregon, but throughout the land, must come to an end. We must return to our sovereign states. This issue of a fictional government proving it has jurisdiction over living, breathing, flesh and blood, sentient, natural men and women who steadfastly hold fast to their rightful position as those of sovereign people, goes to the very heart of freedom in our land. It is as important as the IRS law that doesn't exist, yet has put Ed and Elaine Brown in federal prison for simply asking the fictional courts to show them the law that does not apply to them, a living man and woman who has not consented to become a government person. In my case, I demand that State Trooper Jessica Rice and the Josephine County judges who preside over traffic court matters answer in writing, as the law demands, your proof of jurisdiction over this living man, who is not a surety for the debts of the juristic person, which exists only in man's law, item sonans, and sounds like my name, but it's all capital letters, which is not me. Not a single agent in the employ of the state of Oregon and or county of Josephine for the past 17 years will answer those questions, since they were demanded of the courts in prosecution from the very first appearance to the last appearance in this issue, which began on September the 5th, 2002. My wife of 49 years, Anita, passed away on February the 18th, 2008. I hold the state of Oregon courts and the county of Josephine law enforcement responsible for her death with the vicious, unrelenting stress placed upon both of us in dealing with a government which no longer can be held accountable for their crimes of fraud, infringement of rights, and tyranny. This matter is not going away until you answer under oath or affidavit the questions of jurisdiction I now give you the opportunity to answer the questions of jurisdiction. State your proof of claim or pay the consequences.